This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The United Nations and the African Union condemned deadly attack of a migrants' detention center in Libya. Sentences handed to 3 people found guilty in the Garissa University terror attack in Kenya. And we take stock of major achievements in Rwanda ahead of celebrations to mark 25 years since the end of the genocide there. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight I'm alongside my colleague Penina, who has our business headlines. Penina.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Business, Nigeria finally agrees to join what is to become the biggest free trade zone. And Zimbabwe plans to ban the use of foreign currencies is challenged in court. I'll be back with details of those stories and plenty more in just a bit. For now, Richard, back to you.
Thank you, Penina. We begin the broadcast with the horrific attack of a migrants' detention center in Libya. The United Nations Refugee Agency is now calling for the evacuation of migrant centers and a full investigation into an airstrike outside the capital Tripoli, which killed at least 40 people and wounded more than 130. CGTN's Brian Nta has the details.
The strike hit a detention center said to be filled with African migrants in a suburb of the Libyan capital, Tripoli.
The latest information from our teams is that at least 40 people may have died and that dozens more may be injured. The rescue operation is still underway, so that death toll may well increase. We can no longer have a situation where people are trapped inside detention centres, unable to escape when they get caught up in violence. And we cannot have people being brought back to Libya after being rescued on the Mediterranean if that means being held in these detention centres.
It was the highest publicly reported toll from an airstrike or shelling since the battle for Tripoli's control started in April. Eastern forces under Khalifa Haftar launched a ground and aerial offensive seeking to take over Tripoli. Libya acts as one of the main departure points for migrants attempting to reach European shores. Thousands are held in government-run detention centers in what human rights groups and the United Nations say are often inhuman conditions. The Government of National Accord forces have blamed Khalifa Haftar's LNA unit for the strike. The unit denies the attack.
We know that both sides have the coordinates of these detention centres. Both sides are aware where these detention centres are located and that there are people inside those detention centres at the time being. So what needs to happen now is a full and thorough investigation. Those found to be responsible need to be held to account. Having airstrikes drop on a civilian building in this way is a violation of international humanitarian law, and there needs to be action taken now against those responsible and to make sure this doesn't happen again.
The UN Refugee Agency had already called for the evacuation of the Tajura Center in May. Frightened migrants were still seeking shelter at the structure after it was partially destroyed by a projectile during recent airstrikes. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the African Union is calling for an immediate ceasefire in Libya. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi reports from Addis Ababa.
Dozens of people were killed by the bombing, most of them Africans. 130 are injured. The African Union is condemning the incident and says it wants an independent investigation. The AU says those responsible must be held accountable. Thousands of migrants are being held in government-run detention centers in Libya. Many are smuggled into Libya with a plan to cross the Mediterranean to Europe. AU Commission Chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat is asking the Libyan government to ensure protection and safety of civilians, especially migrants trapped in detention centers. He is also calling for the international community to mount urgent humanitarian efforts to protect vulnerable migrants. The AU had planned for a reconciliation conference for Libya's warring factions in July. African heads of state will discuss the deteriorating security situation in Libya when they meet in Niger this weekend. Colette Njoy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Meanwhile, the United Nations recognized government of national accord is blaming the attack on forces loyal to General Khalifa Haftar. His Libyan National Army has been fighting to seize Tripoli for the past 3 months. CGTN's Laura Walabengu has more.
The attack took place late on Tuesday. The center, which is located next to a military camp in the eastern suburb of Tajura, houses more than 600 people. The part that was directly hit by the
wounded, and they die on the road on their way running, and some people are still under the block, so we don't know what to say. All what we know is we want UN to help people out of this place, because this place is dangerous. We know it's going to happen like this before, but we don't have any power to do anything.
This is the highest publicly reported toll of an airstrike or shelling since Eastern forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive to take over Tripoli in April. These have targeted the center. It came under attack just 3 months ago. Military sources in the government say Haftar's forces are committing war crimes by targeting civilians and residential areas. Libya is a main departure point for migrants from Africa fleeing poverty and war and trying to reach Italy by boat. The European Union has stepped up cooperation with the Libyan Coast Guard to intercept migrant boats. Thousands of migrants are held in government-run detention centers in western Libya in what human rights groups and the United Nations say are often inhuman conditions. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Earlier, we spoke to CGTN's Yasser Hakim on the state of insecurity in Libya and the impact of that devastating attack on a migrant detention center.
It's too early to determine who's behind the attack. Obviously, the government of national accord, led by Fayez Sarraj, has accused the Libyan National Army, which has been on a war with the national accord government in Tripoli. And they've accused the Libyan National Army of this raid, saying that it was intentional to kill civilians. On the other hand, the Libyan National Army is accusing the militias who are in Tripoli and are backed by the government of national accord, of being the ones behind this air raid that has killed the illegal migrants, and therefore it's kind of not clear who is behind the attack. The UN representative for migrants in Libya himself said that he does not know who is behind the raid, and he was there when it happened at the camp, but he says that it's not yet clear who is behind the raid. So there's still unknown information. It's too early at the moment to decide who's behind it. But the problem is, obviously, there are many parties in Libya fighting, and it could be one of them. This just shows you the atrocities of war, and it's just a reflection of how the war in Libya is taking place, and how it's getting worse day by day instead of improving the lives of the Libyans.
To get more perspective on this, we are joined by Bassem Ali, a PhD researcher on political science at the Cairo University and also an editor at Aram Online. Bassem, thank you for taking time out to join us here on Africa Live. Talk to us more about the deadly attack on a migrant detention center. What is the significance, Bassem?
The significance of the incident is that it shows that the international community, mainly the UN negotiators in the conflict, have not yet reached the golden formula or the perfect arrangement through which all parties to this conflict will be capable or at least be prepared to put down their weapons and sit down and negotiate for peace. They still, the UN negotiators, it looks like that they still cannot read the minds of the warring parties. They still cannot exactly understand what each of them wants and what would it exactly require for all of these parties to consider other options other than conflict. I think this is the main significance of today's event, and the implications of the incident, I think, should be more diplomatic than military, especially that we've been spending so many years in war, and yet diplomacy did not produce any fruitful results so far. So the best thing to do at this point of time is to consider what can be diplomatically made in order to stop the conflict and present the Libyan people with a long-standing or a strong solution that can give them peace that they have been looking for long years.
Thank you, Bassem. If you can elaborate from your perspective, how is this attack likely to affect the international perception of the two warring sides in Libya?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question, please?
How is this attack likely to affect the perception of the two warring sides in Libya?
The two warring sides, so far, have been mainly fighting over political power. As we all know, when parties to conflict decide to hold weapons and fight, it's not just for the sake of fighting. It's all about politics. They all have a feeling, or at least an impression, that there is no actual political channels. I mean, there is no influential channels through which they can have some sort of political representation. They can have strong presence in the political arena. We have to always put in mind that this country has been governed by one man for a long period of time, and apparently everyone in Libya is still learning a lot about politics. So for this reason, that's why I'm saying this is time for politics. This is time for diplomacy. It's time for negotiations. Conflict will not lead to anything. Meanwhile, the diplomatic efforts that have been made so far looks like they were not engineered in the best possible manner. So more effort has to be made in that area in order to reach a settlement for this long conflict among the Libyan parties, which has been in place since 2011.
Well, thank you for your insights on that. Back to the migrant detention centers now. The UN Refugee Agency is calling for the evacuation of migrant detention centers in Libya. How practical is that?
The situation concerning the refugees themselves and the UN call, I think, would be practical if a number of prerequisites are provided on the table. Among them is, firstly, the presence of alternatives of other countries who will express readiness to take those migrants. When you have camps or centers that are hosting thousands of migrants, and the UN agency is saying, let's think of an option. Let's think how to deal with the situation in a country that's witnessing war. So the first thing they should think about, I believe, is considering options. Which other countries in the region, whether in Africa, whether in the Middle East, whether in North Africa, or even other parts of the world, which countries will be ready to host those migrants? On the other hand, we have always to refer to the fact that Libya is a transit destination in which illegal migrants move to it as an interim period of their migration journey, or in other words, as an area through which they will afterwards move to another place and stay there for a longer period. And in that sense, I'm referring to Europe. The illegal migrants go to Libya hoping that one day they will go to Europe. Unless you find a comprehensive settlement for this crisis, which might include, I believe, a stronger control over the borders, cooperation among states that are neighboring to Libya, also cooperation among the warring parties in Libya in that aspect, although they have a long list of disagreements. But in terms of illegal migrants, I think everyone will likely agree to the fact that giving them safety is non-negotiable. It's necessary. So unless you provide a package that addresses all of these problems, it will be hard for the UN to achieve its objective that it declared today. But in fact, if it did, things would be much better. And I think the safety and security of those migrants will be an easy target to secure.
All right. Bassem Ali, thank you for bringing us this story. Thank you for breaking it down for us. We appreciate your insight. That was Bassem Ali, a PhD researcher in political science holder at the Cairo University. Here in Kenya, though, a local court has sentenced one person to life in prison and handed down a total of 41 years sentence to two others for their role in the deadly attack on Garissa University in 2015. Rashid Mbarasero, who will serve a life sentence for his leading role in the planning of the attack. The other two, Muhammad Ali Abdikader and Hassan Aden Hassan, were each charged with 3 counts, whose total sentence amounts to 41 years in jail. The terror attack on Garissa University left 148 students dead and scores of others seriously injured. Well, Israel is bracing for another day of protest against police brutality toward Ethiopian Israelis. The rally started on Monday, a day after an off-duty police officer shot and killed Solomon Teka near the northern port city of Haifa. Angry demonstrators hurled stones and petrol bombs and police forces across the country. They also blocked highways by burning tires. Police say more than 100 officers have been wounded and dozens of people have been arrested. The officers involved in the shooting said he was trying to break up scuffles between youth who later threw stones at him. He is now under house arrest pending investigation. You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. The news continues. Let's take a look at what's coming up ahead. We take stock of major achievements in Rwanda ahead of celebrations to mark 25 years since the end of the genocide there. And how South Sudan is preparing to deal with a potential outbreak of Ebola.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Let's now head to Rwanda, and the country is set to celebrate the 25th year since the end of the 1994 genocide. Rwanda's Liberation Day is held every year on July the 4th. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy is in Kigali, Rwanda, and brings us more.
All is set for Rwanda's Liberation Day celebration. This day marks an end to the 1994 genocide that saw hundreds of thousands of people killed in innocent blood. Tomorrow's function is expected to attract several heads of states within Africa and outside the continent. Delegates from regional and international bodies will also attend this function. President Paul Kagame is expected to address issues of economic development, but focus will be on the youth, how their future will be attained, and how they will maintain the peace and security that the country has enjoyed for many years now, to be exact 25 years. Tomorrow, Rwandans will expect a colorful ceremony, and many are already prepared to attend this function. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
Well, as you heard there, Rwanda is set to mark over 2 decades of peace and stability and growing prosperity. Here is CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy once more with details of the East African nation's horrific past and bright future.
Rwanda's War of Liberation began against the genocidal dictatorship in Kigali in October 1990. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame says taking up arms was the last option, considering all efforts for peaceful and democratic change had proven futile and devastated the lives of many Rwandans.
25 years have seen us go from scratch, almost nothing, if not just a total devastation, to something we see today of a country that is continuing to rebuild.
Despite numerous attempts to seek peaceful resolution to the conflict, the then regime became more desperate, orchestrating the genocide in many parts of the country in what officials say was a deliberate effort to ethnic cleansing. But President Paul Kagame was determined to end the genocide. This is the trench President Paul Kagame used to shelter himself from the enemy bombardment, and at the same time used as his command post that eventually saw the liberation of the country.
On one part is where we launched what was supposed to be a process of forming a transitional government that was supposed to be there as a result of the Arusha peace process, which never happened.
But the East African country has moved on, registering an average GDP growth of around 8% between 2001 and 2015. Rwanda is also ranked the second safest country in Africa by the 2018 Gallup Global Law and Order Report. The country is also the sixth major troop and police contributing country to the UN, with over 4,000 troops. 25 years have passed since the Rwanda Patriotic Army ended the 1994 genocide and liberated the country. The East African country has continued to register tremendous achievement, not only in political, social, but economic as well. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
Moving on to Nigeria, and the death toll from Monday's fuel tanker explosion is expected to rise as dozens of the injured remain in critical condition. They are currently receiving treatment at Bishop Murray Hospital in the state capital. 45 people have been confirmed dead following the incident, and we would like to warn you that some of the images might be disturbing.
The aftermath of Monday's deadly fuel explosion. Dozens lay in wait for treatment at this hospital in the state capital. A spokesman for the local council said 45 people were killed in the incident. The police are yet to give an official toll. The fuel tanker explosion took place on Monday when local residents rushed to collect leaking gasoline from an overturned tanker. Fuel tanker and pipeline blasts are common in Nigeria. Fires and explosions often occur as people try to siphon fuel from pipelines or following accidents involving tankers. In January, at least 8 people were killed in the southeastern state of Cross River in a similar incident. Going back to 2012, more than 100 people were killed and some 50 others injured in the River State. Michael Karanja, CGTN.
South Sudan says it's scaling up preparation efforts to ensure any outbreak of Ebola in the country would be contained. The government says it's now vaccinating health workers stationed at border posts with the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda.
We have put up screening centers across the border with the DRC, the Uganda, and also at Juba International Airport and other relevant entry points. We have built, in collaboration with the World Health Organization, an Ebola treatment center in Juba that stands ready to receive cases whenever they occur.
The border communities at South Sudan Democratic Republic of Congo always mix freely in markets and health centers. South Sudan's government says in case of Ebola spread around the border, this could pose a risk for the country. The government says it has now set up screening centers in 31 entry points into the country. It says it has also procured some equipment, including glove box for polymer chain reaction machine, and that experts are in the country for 2 weeks to mentor the public health laboratory personnel on procedure for sample testing and quality control. Humanitarian organizations working in the health sector in South Sudan are requesting for $12 million for a proper preparation for an eventual outbreak of Ebola. South Sudan's health sector is currently less equipped to handle Ebola cases. The 6 years of war has caused economic crisis. Health workers have gone for 6 months without salaries. Hospitals are also poorly supplied with medicines. South Sudan has poor infrastructure such as road network. This means information to the public on Ebola preventive measures is difficult to reach the rural communities, such as the ones at the border with Democratic Republic of Congo. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
Sub-Saharan Africans make up a large portion of migrants crossing into Europe globally, especially those arriving in Italy and Spain. According to the European Commission, as of 2018, Tunisia, Eritrea, Sudan, Nigeria, and Pakistan accounted for the largest number of migrants arriving in Italy. Those in Spain originated from Guinea, Morocco, Mali, and Cote d'Ivoire. Here is CGTN's Deji Badmus with more on this story.
My cousins who were abroad, they called home and told us they needed about 4 people from the family that they wanted to help. So I accepted, and then...
She's one of the thousands of young Nigerians who braved all the inhuman conditions attempting to travel to Europe by road and the sea. But Chilean's journey ended by the Mediterranean in Libya. 6 months after she left the country, 3 of which she spent in a horrible Libyan jail, she was repatriated back to Nigeria last year. Asked why she chose to embark on the journey in the first place, this was her response.
I didn't have a good job. I had just a job where I was paid very little, and I had so many things to take care of. I have younger ones as well. So I decided to leave the country.
It is the same reason that is driving the huge wave of irregular migration seen across sub-Saharan Africa. Whether it's Nigeria, Guinea, Gambia, Mali, Senegal, or Ivory Coast, tough economic condition is at the heart of why many of the continent's youths are making the risky journey across the sea to Europe.
What choice have you left that man or that woman who is taking that decision? We can't just tell them don't go. It's like telling somebody, oh, you're hungry, don't worry, you eat, and there's no food. The first day, the second, the third day, and you say, don't worry, you'll be fine. What does that mean? These people are not running away to become, live luxurious life, by the way. They're not running away to go and, live like kings. And no, they are running away to have a home where they don't have to worry about electricity or gas, or they don't have to be rich to buy a car.
The tough economic conditions are now exacerbated by conflicts in most of Africa, especially sub-Saharan Africa, where almost every single country is grappling with one violent conflict or the other, triggering a serious humanitarian crisis.
We can't just talk the issue. We have to do concrete things that make it change. We have to create jobs by creating a society, an economy, that people can do business and profit from what they are doing. We are afraid to talk profitability in this country, on this continent. Profitability is the basis of enjoyment of life.
Insurgency, religious, ethnic, and separatist conflicts are tearing countries apart. And the more terrorism and insecurity continue to rage unabated, the more the flights to countries where safety of lives is perceived to be guaranteed. Deji Badmus, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, in Niger, an exhibition is celebrating the country's culture of handicrafts, weaving, and jewelry making. Treasure of Niger was scheduled to coincide with the upcoming AU Meet Summit for heads of state and government. CGTN's Daniela Pearson has more on that story.
Treasures of Niger celebrates the West African country's distinct cultural heritage. The exhibition is in collaboration with the Ministry of Culture, which wanted to create something special ahead of the AU's Heads of State and Government Summit.
The fundamental reason is the conservation and the preservation of this cultural heritage that needs to be visited. The second reason is to make them known to future generations. These jewels were worn between the 19th and the 20th century.
The curators took inspiration from an exhibition in France on artisanal jewelry. The heritage objects in this exhibition reflect the knowledge of the elders passed down through the generations. One of the exhibitors is presenting a collection 20 years in the making.
This collection allows me today to pay tribute to my mother, who began this conservation work. I also thank my father and all my family. Today I am really happy to see a dream come true at this exhibition, which everyone can appreciate today.
Treasures of Niger is an exhibition of 2 collections. One half is housed in the National Museum of Niger. The other is in the neighboring Franco-Nigerian Cultural Center.
I really think it's wonderful. I've been looking for opportunities to attend these kinds of events. Now the opportunity has come and I'm very happy to be here. I did not expect this, and there are some types of weaving that I'm not used to seeing.
Obviously, this is an exhibition that is highly valuable. This is something that must continue to help Nigerians discover these beautiful art objects.
In Niger, the handicraft sector is the second largest provider of employment after agriculture. It contributes to 25% of the country's GDP. Hopefully, these treasures on display will inspire the younger generations to continue preserving Niger's national heritage. Daniela Pearson, CGTN.
Well, the news continues on Africa Live. Over to Penina, who has our business headlines. Penina.
Thank you, Richard. And coming up on Africa Live Business, Nigeria finally agrees to join what is to become the biggest free trade zone. And Zimbabwe's plans to ban the use of foreign currencies is challenged in court.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria will sign the African Continental Free Trade Agreement at the upcoming 12th Extraordinary Summit of the Africa Union in Niamey, Niger. Africa's biggest economy has been a key backer of the plan since talks on the pact got underway in 2002. However, it abruptly changed course shortly before the deal was signed last year, following pressure from local unions and businesses fearful that they would be uncompetitive if trade barriers are dropped. The African Continental Free Trade Area aims to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business, people and investments. A Zimbabwean human rights lawyer has filed an application at the High Court asking it to overturn the government's decision to ban the use of foreign currencies. Godfrey Mupanga is seeking to invalidate the process used to abolish the multi-currency system. For many Zimbabweans, the name Zimbabwe dollar brings unpleasant memories of 2008 when the local currency was wrecked by hyperinflation of 500 billion%. Late last month, the government abolished use of all foreign currencies in the country, declaring the interim RTGS dollar as its sole legal tender. Zimbabwe's High Court is yet to set a date for the hearing. Africa is facing another potential debt crisis, with around 40% of low-income countries in the Southern Africa region in debt distress or at high risk of it. The Open Society Initiative for Southern Africa says African governments need to be more transparent when contracting debt to boost the continent's development aspirations, as CGTN's Angela Copeland now explains.
The organisers are optimistic that delegates will come away with a clear direction on the way forward.
And we're going to be collectively trying to say, well, what does this really mean for us? And we're hoping that this is just the beginning of conversations that will happen back in our different countries in Africa.
According to research from the Jubilee Debt Campaign, the foreign debt of between $170 and $210 billion for sub-Saharan Africa between 1995 and 2005 had risen to nearly $407 billion by 2018. Part of the problem appears to be in the debt sustainability analysis.
The IMF and the World Bank employ a relatively sophisticated methodology for conducting debt sustainability analysis for low-income countries and so-called market access countries, which has been revised and updated regularly to improve predictions, but so far has failed to incorporate social, environmental or human rights dimensions of sustainability.
There are signals and warning signs, and they're pointing towards a possible debt burden crisis.
The rapidity of borrowing by African countries is the fastest in the world. Secondly, we've seen quite a number of African countries exceed their carrying capacity in terms of their ability to generate sufficient resources domestically in order to comfortably service their debt. And that has landed some of them back into the embrace of the IMF in terms of stabilization programs and structural adjustment programs.
The solutions to avoiding the potential debt crisis appear fairly straightforward.
Some of the worst experiences which we have seen over the last decade has involved the very wrongful approach of borrowing money in order to finance consumption. Nobody does that. You borrow money in order to improve your productive capacity, to be able to generate more wealth, not to finance recurrent expenditure.
Let's just talk about how do governments borrow, why do they borrow, and what should be the terms on which they borrow, and what are the consequences of all those debts that they take, and what should be the limitations, and how transparent should they be in engaging with the people before they borrow.
Unless those conversations happen between the lenders and the borrowers and the citizens are involved, we're going to enter that crisis mode again. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The extension of Morocco's Tangier Med port has increased the country's total capacity of 13 ports combined to 260 million tons. Tangier Med port, already the biggest in Africa, opened its new extension last week, anchoring Morocco in the Euro-Mediterranean area and in its Maghreb and Arab environment. Tangier Med is a $1.3 billion extension that serves as a junction for shipping between Africa, Europe and Asia. It connects Morocco to 77 countries and 186 ports globally. The port already operates more than 50% of Morocco's exports. With its new terminals, it's set to surpass the Mediterranean's largest ports of Algeciras and Valencia in terms of container capacity. The world has become more connected due to technology, and moving goods from place to place is now much easier. A Kenyan startup, Sendi, is doing just that for fast-moving consumer goods and e-commerce companies. Using a simple app, it connects cargo owners and transporters to help them deliver goods to customers. I paid them a visit to learn more about their business. Take a look.
Technology has changed the way we do business, with companies such as Uber and, in the Kenyan case, M-Pesa, the mobile money transaction app. It is now increasingly easy to do business, and joining the fray is Sendi, a Kenyan startup company that moves goods across the East African region. How does it work? It's very simple. Download the Sendi app, key in location of the pickup and destination of the goods, choose the vehicle you prefer and make your payments. All of this is coordinated from here, Sendi headquarters in the heart of Nairobi, Kenya. From motorcycles to pickups, vans or trucks, depending on the size of your load, it will be delivered.
So this started in 2015, and the need was, you look around basically transport providers, more so in the region, they're basically small and fragmented. So one has 1 to 5 vehicles. And there's no single company that has a huge fleet across the region. So this is actually super inefficient and makes it difficult for fast-moving consumer good companies to be able to transact with them. So we actually saw the need of consolidating this service provider. Instead of going by the roadside to actually be able to transact with them, we'd bring them online and get that information to the customers, these fast-moving consumer good companies and e-commerce companies, to be able to transact with them.
They started with motorcycles, and as trust amongst their customers grew, they added other means of transport such as containers. It's the first startup of its kind in this region. Sendi has taken advantage of the big East African market. It's now venturing into West Africa. It just recently opened up an office in Nigeria. And as the company scales up across the continent, its staff diversity too has grown, attracting talent from across the globe.
And the challenge is getting good talent that basically can adopt the new business model that we're actually running. Things like getting data engineers, getting data analysts, getting good engineers to actually join the team to basically build the company. Because we're a technology business. We don't own any of the assets. So basically our asset is building the technology and to bring in that efficiency. So that has been a huge challenge.
Their services have been packaged to favor their customers with insurance cover for the goods and a tracking service that allows the client to monitor the movement of their goods regardless of which country they are in. As for competition, Sendi says it is not too worried about that.
So our competitors are basically, the market is huge. This is basically a $200 billion market across Africa. If you look at East Africa, it's a $15 billion market. It's still pretty huge. And our competitors are basically the guy who sits on the roadside who basically wouldn't want to join our platform. And that's also a challenge for us to be able to make sure that we build in incentives and we build in a proper value to make sure that all of them basically join our platform.
Developments around the continent, such as the opening of borders between countries as is being effected by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, can only present new opportunities. Meshach and his team see the continent and world as a playground, and technology has enabled them to play. Penina Karibe, CGTN, in Nairobi, Kenya.
Let's now head to Tanzania, where filmmakers say the recently passed laws that restrict foreign film companies from operating in the country could negatively affect the sector. Here's Amy McConaughey with more on that.
Tanzania's film industry has been experiencing significant growth, especially in the Swahili-speaking East and Great Lakes regions. This has seen Tanzanian movie and television stars gain recognition among the region's celebrities. However, the recent passing of the laws, aimed at restricting operations of foreign firms in the East African nation, has left many local filmmakers scratching their heads.
The new law requires companies to submit their scripts before shooting and later the raw footage that has been recorded. I also feel that the government's demand to use recorded footage to promote itself raises copyright issues.
There are other clauses that are not sitting well with the industry players.
It would have been better for Parliament to consult stakeholders first. We could have advised on the best way forward. We understand the government's initiative, but the regulations have to benefit local filmmakers. We cannot grow alone. We need to collaborate with our colleagues from other countries.
If we restrict the number of crew members who are coming to Tanzania, it's good because it's going to provide gigs for the filmmakers, and also it's going to build their capacity, as I was speaking of internal capacity, But also we need to understand that we truly need, to collaborate and work with different crews from different worlds, so that we can expose ourselves into environment where we can have, experience, but also learn more skills.
It appears like players in the filmmaking industry might have to be more innovative to still leave their mark. Amy McConaughey, CGTN.
And that's it for now, but later on Global Business, we'll be giving you more analysis of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. We'll be live in Lagos to hear the perspective from Nigeria. For now, it's back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Penina. The news continues here on Africa Live. We have so much more wonderful, amazing, and inspiring stories coming your way, including, let's take a sneak at the headline. We look at efforts to make fashion sustainable and ethical, and the possibility of fully recycling denim jeans.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. Rwanda has set a broad and inclusive national target known as Vision 2020. The idea is to bring all Rwandans into the country's development agenda, integrating green growth and climate resilience strategies. CGTN's Daniel Arab Moy is in Kigali and brings us more in this report.
Rwanda is taking a proactive approach and putting the environment and climate change at the heart of all the country's policies, programs and plans. Rwanda's mission to maintain a clean and healthy environment has been ongoing since 2008, when it banned the use of non-biodegradable plastic bags and packaging materials. Coletta Ruhamia, the Director General of Rwanda Environment Management Authority, says the only way to protect Rwanda's future generation is to instill the spirit of a clean and healthy environment into the minds and hearts of the population.
Greening Rwanda is beyond actually what you see. Is about greening all sectors, specifically development sectors like agriculture, urbanization. You can see this project as well, where we are now is part of greening the urban areas. And we think if all sectors can green their respective sectors in terms of planning and implementation, we all have that green Rwanda that we wish to have.
The plastic bag ban has earned Rwanda a reputation as one of the cleanest countries in Africa.
We as humankind are stewards of this planet. We're only here a short while, but the earth must go on for a long while. So it's our responsibility to find a way to live in a more sustainable fashion. And I'm glad to see that Rwanda is taking steps on the forefront of taking care of stewarding the planet, because if we don't, we simply will not be able to live.
Rwanda's commitment to conserve the environment is also seen through the protection and restoration of degraded ecosystems such as wetlands and natural forests.
The devastating effects of climate change, if not controlled, can destroy the entire planet Earth. But Rwanda, a country of 12 million people, is trying its best to protect the environment through countrywide greening.
The East African country has also established the Green Fund, a groundbreaking investment fund, the largest of its kind in Africa. The fund supports the best public and private projects that have the potential for transformative change and that supports Rwanda's commitment to building a green economy. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
And now to a fascinating concept in fashion and design. The Berlin Fashion Week has seen new waves of labels hoping to cash in on consumer demand for ethical clothing. Now, this growing demand hopes to bring the industry in line with a rising movement away from mass production and fast fashion. And it could soon include recycling denim jeans. Let's take a look.
Neonite, a hybrid of Greek and Swedish words for night, took to the stage at the Berlin Fashion Week, a curated multi-designer show of sustainable clothing brands, showing that eco-friendly clothing need not be dull. Denim, a wearable staple, has also had an eco-makeover in the form of mud jeans.
To make it smaller and smaller and smaller until you get this again, this beautiful stuff. It looks like the cotton again. Today we still have to mix it with new fresh cotton, but we promise the world that next year, 2020, we will come out with a 100% fully recycled, post-consumer waste denim jeans. But today, this is the yarn we make.
Bart van Son is planning to make the product 100% recyclable by 2020. For now, old jeans are recycled to form yarn to make new pieces.
Luckily, we see a big difference with 7 years ago and today. Consumers are more and more conscious about what's happening, and the information is more and more in the streets. Everybody knows that fast fashion is not the solution for the future. We cannot continue the way we are eating and the way we are consuming clothing as we do today. So they're very happy. Most consumers are very happy with the solution from a brand that comes up, say, okay, bring back your old jeans, you get a €10 discount, and we will recycle it for you.
As well as focusing on better factory conditions and environmental aspects, Mud Jeans is also pioneering use over ownership. Jeans can be leased for a monthly fee, swapped, and repaired for free under its membership scheme. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Don't go away, don't touch that dial. Here's a sneak peek at the headline. Rally drivers in Uganda finalized preparations for the Africa